Don't sign it. The little girl's voice cut through the boardroom like shattered glass. Ethan Whitmore's pen stopped less than an inch above the signature line. Before anyone could react, the child threw both hands around his wrist and held on with surprising strength. Across the table, Attorney Preston Hale went pale. For one suspended second, nobody moved. Then the girl whispered something only Ethan could hear. The last page isn't the same one. 3 hours earlier, rain had already begun tapping against the glass walls of Whitmore Global's headquarters. 82 floors above Manhattan, the city shimmered beneath sheets of silver mist. Inside the executive boardroom, everything looked perfect. The polished walnut table reflected the glow of recessed lights. Crystal water glasses stood untouched beside leather folders. A massive digital screen displayed projections for a deal the financial press was already calling the most important transaction of Ethan Whitmore's career. Yet something felt off. Ethan couldn't explain it. Maybe it was exhaustion. Maybe it was grief. Or maybe it was the faint smell of unfamiliar cologne lingering near the end of the table where Preston sat. The scent didn't belong in this room. Ethan noticed it, then dismissed it. Over the last year, he had learned to dismiss many things. Since his father's death 18 months earlier, the billionaire had become a man surrounded by people but strangely alone. Advisors filled his calendar. Investors filled his inbox. Reporters filled his days. Yet real trust had become rare. That was why he relied so heavily on Preston Hale. The attorney had represented the Whitmore family for nearly 2 decades. If there was one person Ethan believed would never betray him, it was Preston. At least that was what he thought as the meeting prepared to begin. Far below the boardroom, in a service corridor that smelled faintly of bleach and wet concrete, 9-year-old Maya Brooks sat on an overturned supply bucket outside a maintenance closet. Her red dress was faded around the collar. One of her sneakers had a strip of silver duct tape holding the sole together. She kept glancing toward the freight elevator, waiting, listening. Her mother should have finished her cleaning shift 30 minutes ago. Instead, she was still upstairs. Maya pulled her knees closer to her chest. In her lap sat a worn canvas bag. Inside was something she hadn't shown anyone, not even her mother. Piece of paper, torn, crumpled, forgotten by someone who thought nobody important would ever find it. She looked at it again, then quickly folded it away. Footsteps echoed down the corridor. A security guard passed without noticing her. Maya lowered her eyes until he disappeared. Children like her learned early how to become invisible. But tonight she couldn't stay invisible. Because an hour earlier, while searching for her mother, she had seen something she wasn't supposed to see. Something that made her stomach hurt every time she thought about it. Upstairs, the board meeting finally began. Lawyers arranged documents. Executives reviewed numbers. Rain slid slowly down the enormous windows overlooking the city. And in the center of the table rested a thick contract waiting for a signature. Most people saw opportunity. Most people saw billions of dollars. Maya had seen something else. As she reached into her bag once more, her fingers brushed the torn paper and stopped on a detail she hadn't noticed before. In the lower corner, partially hidden beneath a fold, was a handwritten note in blue ink. 3 words. Small, careless, terrifying. Replace page 37. Replace page 37. Maya stared at the words for several seconds, listening to the distant hum of the building around her. Somewhere farther down the service corridor, a washing machine rumbled behind a maintenance door. The sound felt strangely normal compared to the cold knot tightening in her stomach. She folded the torn paper carefully and slipped it back into her canvas bag. Then she stood up. Upstairs, 82 floors above her, Ethan Whitmore was listening to Preston Hale explain why tonight's agreement would secure the future of Whitmore Global for decades. Preston's voice was smooth, practiced, reassuring. The kind of voice people trusted because they wanted to. Around the table, board members nodded. Financial projections glowed across the giant screen. Claire Monroe sat beside Ethan, elegant in a cream-colored jacket, occasionally resting her hand lightly against his arm. Everything looked exactly the way it was supposed to. Yet Ethan found himself glancing toward the contract again. His eyes settled on the final pages. He wasn't sure why. Maybe it was the lingering feeling that something had been bothering him all evening. Maybe it was the memory of arriving early and finding Preston alone in the boardroom. Or maybe it was simply grief making him suspicious of everything these days. He looked down at the document. Page 37. Then page 38. Then back again. Nothing obvious. Nothing dramatic. Just legal language and signatures waiting to happen. Still, he found himself quietly sliding his phone from his pocket beneath the table and taking a picture of the page. He wasn't even sure why he did it. The action felt almost foolish. Across the room, Preston continued speaking without missing a beat. But for the briefest moment, Ethan noticed the attorney's eyes flick downward toward the contract before returning to the presentation. It lasted less than a second. Most people would never have seen it. Ethan did. Meanwhile, Maya stepped into the freight elevator and pressed the button for the executive floors. The old elevator groaned as it climbed. She knew she wasn't supposed to be there. Kids from families like hers weren't welcome in places where billion-dollar deals happened. But she also knew something else. Earlier that evening, while looking for her mother, she had heard voices through a half-open records room door. She hadn't understood every word. Most of it had sounded like grown-up business talk. But she remembered details. Children often did. She remembered Preston's voice. She remembered Claire's laugh. And she remembered one sentence clearly because it sounded strange. Once he signs, it won't matter anymore. At the time, Maya thought they were talking about money. Now she wasn't so sure. The elevator doors opened onto a quiet executive hallway. Thick carpet muffled every footstep. Framed photographs of company founders lined the walls. Maya started walking. Halfway down the corridor, her phone vibrated inside her pocket. The screen lit up with a text from her mother. Just 3 words. "Go home, baby." Relief washed through Maya for a moment. Then she noticed the timestamp. The message had been sent 47 minutes ago. But her mother had never texted her. Not from work. Company policy prohibited employees from carrying phones during cleaning shifts. Maya slowed her steps. 47 minutes ago was also the exact time she had seen Preston leave the records room. She stared at the message again. Then her eyes moved to the sender information. The text came from her mother's number. But underneath it was something she had never noticed before. A second device had accessed the account less than an hour earlier. The words stayed on Maya's screen longer than any child should have had to understand them. A second device had accessed the account less than an hour earlier. She did not know all the ways adults could steal a voice, but she knew her mother's texting style. Her mother never wrote "go home, baby" without a period. She always added one, as if even love needed to be neat. Maya looked back down the silent executive hallway, then tucked the phone against her chest and kept walking. Inside the boardroom, Ethan was still holding his pen, but the room had shifted in a way no spreadsheet could measure. Preston had just finished explaining the final authorization clause when Ethan raised one hand slightly. Not high, not dramatic, just enough to stop him. "Bring up the original draft," Ethan said. Preston's smile stayed in place, but something behind it tightened. "The original draft?" "Yes." Ethan's voice remained calm. "The one sent to my office this afternoon." Claire turned her head slowly toward him. "Ethan, we're already past that stage." "I'm aware." He did not look at her. "I'd like to compare them." For 1 second, nobody spoke. Rain moved softly against the glass, streaking the city into long lines of light. Then Preston gave a small laugh, the kind people used when they wanted a concern to feel childish. "Of course, but opening old versions in the middle of a signing can create confusion. The board has reviewed the final copy. The safest thing is to complete the execution first, then we can archive everything properly." Maya reached the boardroom doors just as he said the word safest. She pushed one door open with both hands. Several heads turned. A guard moved instantly, but Maya lifted her small canvas bag before anyone touched her. "He doesn't want you to open it," she said. Preston's face changed. Not enough for everyone, but enough for Ethan. This is absurd, Preston said softly. Security, remove her. Maya did not step back. Her sneakers were wet from the service corridor, leaving 2 faint marks on the expensive carpet. Ask him why the key card was used twice. Ethan's eyes moved from Maya to Preston. What key card? Maya swallowed. Her voice got smaller but sharper. My mama's. They said she lost it, but she didn't. I saw it clipped on her cart at 9:12. Preston looked down at his leather case, then back up too quickly. Children are not reliable witnesses to exact times. Maya reached into her bag and pulled out a folded cafeteria receipt, smoothed carefully from being carried too long. I know the time because I bought her soup at 9:10. The receipt says so. I brought it upstairs. She was still wearing the card. Ethan took the receipt. Chicken noodle soup. Bottled water. 9:10 p.m. basement cafe. His thumb paused over the ink. And the second use? Maya looked at the contract on the table. 9:47. On this floor. After they sent her downstairs. The boardroom went quiet enough to hear Claire's phone buzz once inside her purse. She did not reach for it. Ethan turned to Preston and asked very gently, How would you know cleaning staff weren't allowed here tonight unless you checked the access logs? Preston opened his mouth, then closed it. Maya's eyes dropped to his leather case again, and for the first time Ethan noticed a small white corner sticking out from the side pocket, printed with the same security badge number as Maya's receipt. The corner of the badge printout disappeared back into Preston Hale's leather case almost immediately, so quickly that anyone else might have doubted they had seen it at all. Ethan did not say anything. He simply memorized it. Across the room, one of the board members cleared his throat. Mr. Whitmore, he said carefully. With respect, this has gone far enough. Several others nodded. Not aggressively, not cruelly, just with the quiet confidence of people accustomed to order. We're discussing a multi-billion-dollar transaction, another board member added. We cannot suspend a meeting every time someone walks in with a story. Maya felt dozens of eyes settle on her at once. She suddenly looked even smaller standing beside the polished conference table. Her faded red dress, her worn sneakers, the canvas bag hanging from one shoulder. It all seemed painfully visible under the boardroom lights. Claire Monroe rose smoothly from her chair. She did not raise her voice. She did not insult Maya. Somehow that made it worse. Sweetheart, Claire said gently. I think everyone appreciates that you're worried about your mother. She offered a sympathetic smile. But adults sometimes misunderstand complicated situations too. It's very easy for a child to connect things that aren't actually connected. A few people around the table visibly relaxed. Her explanation sounded reasonable, safe, professional. Maya tightened her grip on the strap of her bag. I didn't misunderstand. Claire's smile never moved. Of course. The words were polite. The tone was dismissal. Ethan watched the exchange quietly. Something about it bothered him. Not because Claire sounded wrong. She sounded perfectly reasonable. That was the problem. Maya looked toward him. For a second, Ethan saw something he had not expected. She was scared. But she was not asking to be rescued. She was trying to make herself heard. There was a difference. Before he could speak, the head of security stepped forward. Sir, he said respectfully, we should probably move Miss Brooks to another room while this is reviewed. Again, it sounded reasonable. Nobody was threatening her. Nobody was shouting. Yet somehow the effect was the same. The conversation was moving forward without her. Maya understood that too. Children who grew up around power often learn something adults forgot. A person could be removed from a room long before anyone touched them. My mother didn't lose that card, Maya said quietly. The security chief glanced at her. That determination hasn't been made. She didn't. Maya, Claire said softly. Sometimes when people are under stress, they make mistakes they don't remember. Maya looked directly at her. My mama labels everything. The room fell silent for a moment. Every key, Maya swallowed. Every cleaning bottle. Every lunch container. Even the TV remote. Nobody responded. She writes her name on everything because she says people stop seeing you when you clean buildings. Ethan felt something tighten inside his chest. Claire looked away first, only briefly, but Ethan noticed. Then Preston finally stepped in. "Enough," he said calmly. "We are discussing corporate governance, not housekeeping procedures." He closed the leather case with a firm click. "The child's concerns have been noted. We can investigate the access logs tomorrow." Tomorrow. The word seemed to settle across the room like a decision already made. Several board members nodded again. Tension eased. The meeting appeared to be returning to normal. Preston placed one hand on the contract. Claire sat back down. The board began reorganizing papers. For a moment it looked as though they had regained control. Then Maya noticed something. Her eyes dropped to the table, to the stack of documents Preston had just gathered. One sheet had slid partially free when he closed the case. Just half an inch. Barely visible. But it was enough. Because stamped across the bottom corner was a document control number. Maya looked at the contract on the table, then back at the exposed page. The numbers matched exactly, and both pages were labeled version 12. The final contract Ethan was about to sign had supposedly been version 15. Version 12. Ethan stared at the number without speaking. Around the table, papers continued to shift. Board members adjusted folders. Someone quietly cleared a throat. The meeting tried to move forward. Yet the small sequence of numbers seemed to pull all the air out of the room. Version 12. The contract in front of him was supposed to be version 15. Preston noticed Ethan. Looking. "Administrative labeling issue," he said smoothly. "Nothing unusual." Ethan did not answer. His gaze remained fixed on the page protruding from the leather case. Administrative labeling issue. The explanation sounded perfectly reasonable. That was becoming a problem. Too many things tonight sounded reasonable. Maya watched him carefully. She could feel the room trying to close around the truth again. Adults were good at that. They wrapped things in words until sharp edges disappeared. Slowly, she reached into her canvas bag. "I brought something else." Preston's eyes moved to the bag immediately, just for a second. But Maya caught it. Ethan caught it too. The little girl pulled out a folded sheet of paper. It was worn at the corners and stained with a faint brown coffee ring. Not impressive. Not dramatic. Just a piece of paper most people would have thrown away. "What is that?" asked one board member. Maya walked around the edge of the table and handed it directly to Ethan. "I found it in the trash behind the copy room." Ethan unfolded it carefully. His eyes narrowed. It was not a contract page. It was a printing confirmation report from one of the executive floor printers. Date, time, user ID, number of pages printed. The details looked meaningless at first. Then Ethan noticed one line. Original document, 42 pages. Final printed document, 43 pages. He read it again. 42 pages. 43 pages. One additional page. Ethan felt something shift inside him. A memory surfaced. 3 weeks earlier, he had reviewed the acquisition draft personally. 42 pages. He remembered because he had joked about it during a late-night conference call. 42 pages was still too long, he had said. Preston had laughed. Claire had laughed. Everyone remembered. Ethan lowered the paper. "This printer report says 43. Preston folded his hands together. "Draft revisions happen constantly." "After board approval?" Ethan asked quietly. Nobody answered immediately. Rain continued sliding down the windows. Somewhere far below, a siren echoed through the city streets and disappeared. Maya reached into her bag again. This time she pulled out something smaller. A flash drive attached to a faded pink keychain. "My mama found this under the printer cabinet last week." Preston's jaw tightened almost invisibly. "Maya," Ethan said carefully, "why didn't your mother turn this in?" "Because she didn't know whose it was." Maya hesitated. "And because she got suspended before she could ask." Ethan took the flash drive. It was old, scratched, cheap, yet he found himself turning it over in his hand longer than necessary. Then he noticed something. Tiny white label. Handwritten. Just 3 letters. P.H. Preston Hale. Ethan remembered the label maker his legal team used. He remembered Preston marking case drives exactly this way for years. Across the table, Claire finally spoke. Ethan, this is getting ridiculous. Her voice remained calm. A child is bringing random items from maintenance closets and trash bins. Ethan looked at her, then at Preston, then back at the flash drive resting in his palm. Neither of them met his eyes immediately, and for the first time that night, Ethan realized something he could not explain away. He trusted Preston Hale enough that he would have signed almost anything placed in front of him. Yet somehow Preston seemed far more nervous about a discarded flash drive than a billion-dollar contract. The room remained quiet after Claire spoke. Not the comfortable quiet of confidence. The kind that appeared when people were waiting to see which version of reality would survive. Ethan turned the flash drive over once more before slipping it into his jacket pocket. "We'll take a short recess," he said calmly. Several board members exchanged surprised glances. Preston opened his mouth as if to object, then thought better of it. 10 minutes, Ethan added. Nobody leaves the floor. The instruction sounded routine, administrative, yet something in his tone made people obey immediately. Chairs shifted. Conversations started in low voices. The boardroom slowly emptied. Ethan did not rush. He gathered the printer report, folded it neatly, and slipped it beside the flash drive. Then he walked toward the windows overlooking Manhattan. Rain drifted across the glass in silver lines. Behind him, Claire approached. Quietly, "You're letting this child get into your head." Ethan kept looking at the city. "Maybe. She's scared for her mother." Claire's voice softened. "That doesn't mean she understands what she's seeing." Ethan nodded once. "Maybe." It was the same answer. Somehow that unsettled Claire more than an argument would have. A few minutes later, Ethan stepped into a smaller conference room adjacent to the boardroom. He closed the door and took out his phone. Not to call the police. Not to confront anyone. Instead, he called a man whose number had been in his contacts for nearly 15 years. Richard Mercer. The only outside attorney Ethan trusted more than Preston Hale. The call lasted less than 2 minutes. Ethan asked only 3 questions. Could a final draft legally gain an additional page after board approval? Could beneficiary language be moved into a supplementary section without triggering standard alerts? And if someone wanted to hide such a change, where would they start? Richard's silence after the 3rd question lasted longer than any answer. "Ethan," he finally said, "why are you asking me that?" Ethan looked through the glass wall at the boardroom beyond. Preston was speaking quietly with Claire near the table. "Because I should have asked sooner." He ended the call. Downstairs, in the employee break room, a small television played muted late-night news while an aging refrigerator hummed in the corner. Maya sat alone at a plastic table. A paper cup of hot chocolate rested untouched in front of her. Ethan had arranged for someone to bring it. She wrapped both hands around the cup but never drank. A security supervisor entered and sat across from her. "Mr. Whitmore wants to know if there's anything you'd like." Maya looked confused. "Like what?" "Money. Transportation. A hotel if your mother needs assistance." Maya shook her head immediately. "I just want my mama not to get blamed." The supervisor stared at her for a moment. Most adults asked for things when frightened. Maya asked for someone else. "That's all?" he said. She didn't do anything wrong. Her answer came so quickly it sounded rehearsed. Not because she had practiced it. Because she had already decided. Upstairs, Ethan entered the Executive Archives database from a secure terminal. Something small had been bothering him since Maya mentioned the access card. He pulled up personnel records, then maintenance schedules, then disciplinary reports. The screen filled with years of employee history, most of it meaningless, until one name appeared repeatedly. Angela Brooks, Maya's mother. Every performance review described the same thing. Reliable, accurate, never late, no disciplinary history, no security violations. 21 years with the company. Ethan leaned back slowly. Then he opened the suspension report filed against her that morning. His eyes stopped on the approving signature.
Preston Hale.
Ethan stared at the document. Legal counsel did not normally approve maintenance suspensions. That responsibility belonged to human resources. He checked the previous year's records. Then the year before. No legal signatures. Not one. Rain tapped softly against the windows again as Ethan looked at the screen. For 20 years he had trusted Preston to protect the company. But as he stared at Angela Brooks's spotless record and the unusual signature beneath her suspension notice, a thought entered his mind that refused to leave. Preston Hale had not been protecting Whitmore Global. He had been protecting something else. The board members were slowly returning to their seats when Ethan walked back into the room. Nothing about him appeared different. His tie was still perfectly straight. His expression remained calm. Yet several people noticed he no longer carried the contract. He placed a sealed manila envelope in the center of the table instead. Nobody asked what was inside. "Before we continue," Ethan said, taking his seat, "I have one question." Preston folded his hands. "Of course." Ethan looked toward the wall screen. "Would you remind everyone when Angela Brooks's access card was first reported missing?" Preston answered immediately. Approximately 9:45 p.m. Maya, sitting quietly near the end of the room now, lowered her eyes. That was exactly what she had hoped he would say. Ethan nodded once. "And you're certain?" "Yes." "Good." Ethan's voice stayed neutral. He turned to the IT director seated halfway down the table. "Would you pull the access logs?" A faint tension entered the room. Not panic. Not yet. The IT director opened his laptop. A loading wheel appeared on the large screen. Around the table, nobody spoke. Rain tapped softly against the glass. Somewhere near the coffee station, an untouched glass of water sat beside a stack of legal folders. Preston glanced at it once, then away. Maya noticed. The loading wheel continued spinning. 5 seconds. 10. 15. Nobody liked waiting when the answer might already exist. Ethan finally looked toward Maya. "Tell them what you told me." Maya swallowed. Her voice was small inside the enormous room. "My mama labels everything." A few people exchanged confused looks. Maya continued. "Even her access card." "Why?" Ethan asked gently. "Because people borrow things and forget." Maya reached into her canvas bag and removed a folded photograph. She had carried it for years because it showed her and her mother at a county fair. Most people would have seen only the smiling faces. Maya pointed at something else. Hanging from Angela Brooks's belt loop was her employee badge. On the back, partially visible beneath the plastic holder, was a bright yellow sticker, handwritten in black marker. A.B. Ethan handed the photo to the nearest board member. Then another. Then another. The room grew quieter. "Angela puts that sticker on everything," Maya said. "Even her lunchbox." The access logs finished loading. Rows of timestamps filled the screen. Ethan remained silent. The IT director frowned. "That's strange." Nobody moved. "What is?" Ethan asked. The man pointed toward the screen. "The card used at 9:47 on this floor doesn't show the yellow identifier code." Preston shifted slightly in his chair. "Barely noticeable." But Ethan saw it. "Explain." "Every employee sticker contains a secondary inventory tag," the IT director said. "The 912 basement scan includes it. The 947 executive floor scan doesn't." Silence settled across the boardroom. Not because anyone fully understood yet, because suddenly they did. The scans belonged to two different cards. At that exact moment, a phone vibrated against the polished table. Nobody reached for it. The sound seemed unusually loud. Preston's hand moved instinctively toward his jacket pocket, then stopped. Across the room, Maya looked up. For the first time all night, Preston Hale was not looking at Ethan Whitmore. He was looking directly at her. And in that moment, he understood something that made the color leave his face. The little girl was no longer standing alone. No one spoke after the access log discrepancy appeared on the screen. The silence stretched so long that even the rain against the windows seemed louder. Ethan sat motionless at the head of the table, his eyes fixed on the timestamps. Across from him, Preston Hale remained perfectly still. Too still. The kind of stillness that looked controlled until someone noticed how hard a person was trying not to move. Then Maya remembered something. Her hand tightened around the canvas bag. "The camera," she said quietly. Nobody reacted at first. "What camera?" Ethan asked. Maya looked toward the ceiling corner of the boardroom. "Not this one." She shook her head. "The copy room camera." Preston finally turned toward her. "There is no camera inside the copy room." "Not inside," Maya replied. "Outside." Her voice stayed small. "The one above the hallway clock." Ethan looked immediately at the security director. "Pull it." Preston leaned forward. "That footage is automatically overwritten every 72 hours. "Then we're fortunate," Ethan said calmly. "Tonight is only the second day." The security director began typing. A video window appeared on the large screen. Loading. Processing.
Retrieving archive.
The progress bar crawled forward 1% at a time. Nobody seemed to breathe. Then the footage appeared. Grainy. Silent. Time-stamped. The hallway outside the executive copy room. Employees passed. Cleaning carts rolled through. Normal. Ordinary. The kind of footage nobody watches because nothing ever happens. Then Maya pointed. "There." The screen froze. Angela Brooks pushed her cleaning cart down the hallway at 9:14 p.m. Ethan studied the image. Her access card hung from her belt exactly as Maya had described. Yellow sticker. Visible. AB handwritten on the back. "Keep going," Ethan said. The video resumed. Angela disappeared around the corner. At 9:21 p.m., another figure entered the hallway.
Preston Hale.
He looked both directions before unlocking the copy room door. Several board members shifted uncomfortably. Preston's face revealed nothing. The footage continued. At 9:39 p.m., Preston exited carrying a thick stack of documents. Then something happened that made Maya sit forward. "Pause." The security director paused the video. "Zoom in." The image enlarged. Ethan felt his stomach tighten. In Preston's left hand was a white access card. Not his own. Angela Brooks's. The yellow sticker was clearly visible. Nobody spoke. The security director resumed playback. At 9:46 p.m., 1 minute before the executive floor scan, Preston stopped beside Angela's unattended cleaning cart. He bent down, then casually slipped the card beneath a folded janitor's rag. The boardroom remained completely silent. Ethan stared at the screen. He could not speak. 21 years. 21 years Angela Brooks had worked in his company. 21 years without a single disciplinary issue. And he had signed her suspension notice without reading beyond the first page. Because Preston had told him to. Slowly, Ethan looked toward Maya. The little girl lowered her eyes. Not victorious. Not proud. Just tired. As if carrying a truth nobody wanted had become heavy. Ethan felt something colder than anger settle inside him. It was shame. Preston opened his mouth. Perhaps to explain. Perhaps to deny. Ethan never gave him the chance. He reached into his jacket, removed the flash drive, the printer report, and the suspension notice. One by one, he placed them on the table. Then he looked at the security director and spoke in a voice so calm it frightened everyone in the room. "Lock the footage." He turned toward the phone beside him. "And call my attorney." The fallout did not arrive with shouting. It arrived with signatures. 3 weeks later, Preston Hale was no longer an attorney at Whitmore Global. The board voted unanimously to terminate his position and refer the evidence to federal investigators. The altered contract, the manipulated access records, the unauthorized use of employee credentials, and the attempted transfer provisions hidden inside the agreement triggered an investigation that stretched far beyond a single meeting. Claire Monroe quietly resigned from every company-related role before the board could remove her. The wedding never happened. There were no dramatic scenes in the newspapers, just a short statement about governance violations and a leadership review. But everyone inside the company understood what it meant. The people who had hidden behind authority were gone. The people who had trusted authority without looking closely enough had to face what they had missed. Ethan Whitmore started with himself. One rainy Thursday morning, he stood in front of more than 1,000 employees gathered in the company auditorium. Executives filled the front rows. Maintenance staff sat in the back. Normally, this time Ethan requested that every department sit together. No separate sections.
No hierarchy.
Angela Brooks sat beside accounting clerks, receptionists, and project managers. She looked uncomfortable in the spotlight. Ethan walked to the microphone carrying only a single folder. For 21 years, he said, Angela Brooks worked in this company with integrity. The room was silent. When she was accused, I signed a suspension notice without asking enough questions. He paused. That failure belongs to me. Across the auditorium, Angela lowered her eyes. Ethan continued. A company is not judged by how it treats people with power. It is judged by how it treats people whose names never appear on the building. The applause started slowly, then spread through the room. Not because he was a billionaire, because people recognized the truth when they heard it. Angela's suspension was erased from her record. The company restored her position with full back pay and offered her a supervisory role she had quietly earned years earlier. Independent legal counsel was assigned to protect her rights throughout the investigation. Whitmore Global also established a new employee review office where disciplinary actions could no longer pass through a single executive. Without oversight. Months later, Maya still carried the old canvas bag. She refused every expensive replacement offered to her. Ethan stopped trying to replace it after the third attempt. Some things mattered for reasons money could not understand. One evening, as autumn settled over the city, Ethan drove himself to the small townhouse where Maya and Angela now lived. Safe neighborhood, reliable heat, working smoke detectors, a place chosen carefully, not extravagantly. Inside, the kitchen smelled like chicken soup and fresh bread. The television played softly in the living room. Angela set bowls on the table while Maya sat doing homework beneath a warm lamp. The scene was ordinary. That was what made it beautiful. Ethan noticed an old object resting on a shelf near the window, the faded canvas bag. Beside it sat the printer report, folded and preserved inside a simple frame. Maya followed his gaze. My mama wanted to throw it away. And you didn't let her? Ethan asked. Maya smiled. No, sir. Why? She thought about it for a moment, then looked back down at her homework. Because that's the paper everybody ignored. Ethan stood very still. Outside, rain tapped softly against the glass. Inside, the kitchen glowed with warmth. A child returned to her schoolwork. A mother prepared dinner without fear of losing her job. And a man who once believed power meant having all the answers finally understood something much more important. Maya picked up her pencil and said quietly, People tell the truth all the time. They just need someone to listen. Ethan could not think of anything to say, because for the first time in a very long time, the truth had been stronger than power, and the people everyone overlooked had finally been heard.